Chapter 1. The Poison Needle. Truth wears no mask, seeks neither place nor applause, bows to no human shrine. She only asks a hearing. The increasing flood of evidence against vacations and the growing for the unsuppressed facts about this touchy subject have literally forced this book into being. As this work has progressed and the extensive research has been carried to trace down and organize the material for this manuscript, other valuable, long-concealed records that I had not expected have come into my hands as if by some unseen power. It is to be hoped that the information contained within these pages will help to sweep away the tragic errors that cloud the minds of the people as well as the physicians. It is urgent that the living words of truth or some other force be applied to abolish that deadly weapon, the poison needle, which has been the menacing roadblock standing in the way of progress in the healing field for these many years. Vacations and the false germ theory upon which it is hinged has led mankind far astray and has severed the fragile thread that offered medical theory and practice a hope of becoming a science. Under the sway of our present degenerative medical methods, the health of our people has declined to the lowest point in history. The 1955 survey showed that over 90% of our population is below par mentally or physically. According to life insurance records, Army reports, hospital statements, government statistics, and physical examinations for marriage certificates and employment, etc., it is revealed that there is hardly one normal, healthy person in 100. The Cancer Foundation states that 1 out of every 4 is marked for cancer. The figures on heart trouble are even worse than that, and the other killer diseases, quote-unquote, come in for their toll. Practically all the rest of the people have symptoms of less serious diseases. These symptoms being headaches, constipation, weak eyes, dental caries, colds, pain, stomach trouble, etc. Most, if not all, diseases are avoidable and curable at a certain stage, but not under the deceptive medical method of poisoning the well and the sick with the vacations and drugs and mutilating them with unnecessary operations. When socialized medicine was threatening, a meeting of medical officials was called to discuss just how many and which operations would really be necessary if there was no profit in it. It was decided that only 3% would be considered essential under those conditions. This information came from a medical student whose instructor had attended the meeting. Where have the great strides of medical science, quote-unquote, taken us? After a glance at the medical records covering the past 70 years of what boastfully called our great strides of medical science, quote-unquote, we can hardly help wondering if those 7 league strides haven't been in reverse, because they're a marked decline in our nation's health and a shocking increase in the killer diseases during those very years. The acute diseases that were to have been conquered by vacations have only been masked and saved face or suppressed until the retained poisons corroded the internal organs and developed into dangerous chronic diseases. The following table gives us an idea of what our present faulty methods are doing to our race. Increase in killer diseases during the past 70 years. Insanity increased 400%. Cancer increased 308%. Anemia increased 300%. Epilepsy increased 397%. Bright's disease increased 65%. Heart disease increased 179%. Diabetes increased 1,800% in spite of or because of insulin. Polio increased 680%. Never in the history of this country have preventable diseases flourished with such wild abandon, continuously being fed by the very drugs and commercialized irritants that set them into operation in the first place. Dr. Alexis Carrel of the Rockefeller Institute stated in Scientific Monthly, July 1925, although the adult individual today has much less chance of dying from the disease that starts with an S, and the second part, which starts with a P, cholera or typhoid, than he had 50 years ago, he surely has more prospect of being tortured by some form of cancer, afflicted with slow diseases of the kidneys, of the circulatory apparatus, of the endocrine glands, and of going insane. Modern medicine protects him, attempts to, against infections which kill rapidly, but leaves him exposed to the slower and more cruel diseases. That's the end of the quote. Annie Riley Hale, in the Medical Voodoo, quote-unquote, speaks of, quote, medicine as a system of healing which, after 5,000 years of trial and error, is describing itself as a, quote, science in the making, unquote, whose proudest showing to date is that it has enabled the race to swap the SP disease for cancer and typhoid fever for diabetes and insanity, may still be worthy of credence and patronage by its devoted followers. But what justification can there be for putting the whole power of the government back of such a system and the public treasury at its disposal to spread misleading propaganda about its own peculiar doctrines and methods to force them on the helpless? End quote. Although there are a number of far more successful and efficient systems of healing in this country, the medical system is the only one that gets endorsement and support from the government. All our tax-supported Department of Health, hospitals, and institutions are under the domination of medical personnel. In spite of the financial support, public confidence, and full-scale experimentation and testing of all their methods and theories, the medical school of healing has utterly failed to control any of the killer diseases and doesn't have a sure cure for even one of the mild diseases. Small p and other epidemics were largely controlled by improvements in sanitation and nutrition years before vacations became popularized. Yet a tremendous sum of money is poured into the medical coffers every year with no accounting made for its use and no benefits received. Isn't it time that this squandering of public funds be stopped and the better qualified practitioners be given a chance to salvage the wreckage before it's too late? The inside story. After half a century of medical practice, Dr. John Tilden made the following observation regarding inadequate medical procedures. Quote, ability to cure has not kept pace with diagnoses, and today we behold the scientific paradox of skilled physicians sometimes knowing exactly what disease the patient is suffering with, but unable to cure the disease. Ability to diagnose, but impotence in curing, is the true status of scientific medicine. Clinicians are floundering about in a sea of speculation and uncertainty concerning cause and cure, and the best of them declare that autopsies prove that almost half of their diagnoses are wrong. End quote. And in parentheses it says, Dr. Charles Mayo in a radio broadcast stated that at their clinic, autopsies show that they get only 20% of diagnoses right. And to begin the quote again, every part of the body is represented by a specialist. The irony of all this professional perfection, question mark in parentheses, is summed up in a few words, namely, diagnosis is an elaborate system of summing up effects without a scintilla of knowledge of cause, and treatment is a stupendous scheme of palliation with braggadocio concerning vaccinations. Vacations. But the question will not down. How is a disease to be prevented or cured when the cause is unknown? All 400 or more so-called diseases are nothing more than expressions of our general systemic derangement, states which I am pleased to name toxemia or healing crises. Toxemia is a state of body poisoning, self-generated or induced by vacation, serums, drugs, or other poisons. And in quotes, it says, Philosophy of Health by Tilden. R.T. Trawl, M.D., was another doctor who gave the medical method a long and thorough trial before abandoning it as failure. He turned to nature and its simplicity, and upon its sound basic laws of healing, he brought about miracles of recovery from all diseases. After trying to justify the inconsistencies in medical theory, he had this to say, quote, why has not success in treating disease kept pace with the extraordinary progress of knowledge of other sciences? The answer is ready. A successful practice of the healing art must be based upon the laws of life, the economy of vitality. The only foundation, therefore, of true healing is correct physiological principles, and here is precisely where the whole orthodox medical system of the present day fails, utterly and totally fails. It has no physiological and biological science upon which to truly practice the healing art. These are strong words coming from medical doctors who know the system thoroughly. Medicine is a paying game, financially speaking, and for successful practitioners to leave it for the sake of honesty, integrity, and idealism indicates that these cherished qualities are lacking in that branch of business. It is this lack of correct physiological and biological principles that has enabled the medical profession to foist such an unscientific delusion as vacations on the public. Vacations are based on a false premise. The false, quote, germ theory, unquote, of disease upon which vacations are based has been the blind leader of the blind that has dragged the medical system and the impressionable public deeper into the morass of confusion and disease. The germ theory is discussed at length in the chapter titled On Friendly Terms with Germs in Book 2. However, our present concern in this chapter is merely to point out the instability of the nebulous theory of antibodies, which is the main prop that holds up the dead corpse of vacations. In Volume 6 of The Hygienic System, Dr. Herbert M. Shelton brings into sharper focus this tricky subject of antibodies. These elusive little nothings have fooled the people and served the uses of the doctors, but have vanished into theory when subjected to the clear light of scientific investigation. Dr. Shelton writes, quote, "The whole of the modern medical practice of vacations, serum, and antitoxin therapy is based upon the supposition that the body manufactures substances called antitoxins, antibodies, antigens, etc., which are capable of meeting and destroying toxins that get into the body. The idea seems to be sound, although it is possible that the work of destroying such toxins is that of the detoxification carried on by the liver and lymph glands, etc. Antitoxins, antibodies, antigens, etc. have never been isolated. They have only been assumed, while the practice based upon their assumed existence has been both a failure and disaster. However, this may not be due to their non-existence. If they exist, it is impossible to separate them from the proteins of the animal's blood in making vacations, and these proteins, when injected directly into the blood of other animals or human beings, are very poisonous. Besides this, there is no evidence that the antitoxins of one species can be made use of by another species. Where vacations are employed, it constitutes the introduction of actual disease matter into the blood. That is, the suppressed causative germs or some product of the disease is introduced into the body. The consequences are often terrible. Real benefits are never observed. If the hypothesis that the body manufactures antitoxins, antibodies, etc. is correct, it still remains to be proven that the body ever manufactures these greatly in excess of the need for them. It cannot be shown that free antitoxin, antibodies, etc. are suspended in the blood serum and can therefore be transferred to another animal in sufficient quantities to be of use to the receiving animal. In keeping with the general law of life, it is very probable that the body does manufacture an excess of antibodies, but it cannot be shown that it retains these after the need for them has ceased. On the contrary, in keeping with another general law of life, it is very probable that the body begins to get rid of them the very instant the need for them ceases. If they exist, they are chemical substances produced to meet an emergency and will be cast out as soon as the emergency ceases to exist." End quote. The renowned Dr. Antoine Béchamp, one of the world's foremost scientists and bacteriologists, observed that the microorganisms that are ordinarily called germs evolve out of decaying cells they help to build, and take part in the decomposing of the ever-changing life substance and help to form it into material usable again by nature. Thus, when germs are found within a sick body, it is not that they entered from outside and caused the disease. It is because they develop from the decaying cells within the body and have an important part to play in helping to handle the waste and destruction brought about by serums, drugs, and other poisons forced upon the body from without. Perhaps our modern bacteriologists have seen this activity of the microzymas and jumped to the conclusion that they are antibodies fighting disease and that they, the doctors, must inject more of them into the body by way of vacations. But anyone with common sense and reasoning can see that this would only interfere and disrupt the well-organized efforts of nature. This is the reason why vacations have still taken such a heavy toll of lives and have produced such widespread disease. Nature makes no mistakes and violates no laws. She is uniformly governed by fixed principles, and all her actions harmonize with the laws that govern these actions. In parentheses, The Hygienic System, page 48, by Shelton. The best, indeed the only, method of promoting individual and public health is to teach people the laws of nature and thus teach them how to preserve their health. Vacation programs are futile and are based on the delusions that the law of cause and effect can be annulled. Vacations and serums are employed as substitutes for right living. They are intended to supplant obedience to the laws of life. Such programs are slaps in the face of law and order. Belief in vacations is a form of delusional insanity. In parentheses, Principles of Natural Healing, page 48, by Shelton. Vacation lowers resistance and invites disease. Dr. J.W. Hodge had considerable experience with vacations before he denounced them and wrote a book on his collected data. In his book, The Vacation Superstition, page 41, he states, quote, "After a thorough investigation of the most authentic records and facts in harmony with the physician's daily observations and experiences, the conclusion is drawn that instead of protecting its subjects from contagion of small p, vacation actually renders them more susceptible to it. Vacation is the implantation of disease. That is its admitted purpose. Health is the ideal state to be sought, not disease. Every pathogenic disturbance in the infected organism wastes and lowers the vital powers and thus diminishes its natural resisting capacity. This fact is well known and so universally conceded that it seems superfluous to cite authorities. Nevertheless, I shall mention one. The International Textbook of Surgery, Volume 1, page 263, is authority for the following statement. Quote, persons weakened by disease or worn out by excessive labor yield more readily to infection than healthy individuals. If this is true, it explains why in various epidemics small p always attacks the vacationed first, and why these diseases continue to infest the civilized world while its allied or unvacationed filth diseases have disappeared before the advance of civilization through good offices of sanitation, hygiene, and improved nutrition. Summarizing the case against vacation, Dr. Hodge continues, after a careful consideration of the history of vacations gleaned from an impartial and comprehensive study of vital statistics and pertinent data from every reliable source, and after an experience derived from having vacationed 3,000 subjects, I am firmly convinced that vacations cannot be shown to have any logical relation to the diminution of cases of small p. And 1. That the practice of vacations has been the means of disseminating some of the most fatal and loathsome diseases, such as leprosy, syphilis, tetanus, and tuberculosis. 2. That vaccination is not only useless but positively injurious. Of protecting its subjects from contagion of smallpox, it actually renders them more susceptible to it by depressing their vital power and diminishing natural resistance. 3. That immunity from all diseases is to be realized through the attainment of health, not by the propagation of disease. 4. That it is never necessary to set up one disease in a healthy organism to protect against another, that such procedure is an appalling violation of the basic principles of hygiene and sanitary science. 5. That the performance of the vacation operation in the very nature of the case violates the cardinal precepts of modern aseptic surgery, the aim of which is to exclude the products of disease from the organism and never to introduce them. 6. That there is no evidence worthy of the same on record to prove that vacation either prevents or mitigates small p. 7. That many healthy children have died from the effects of vacations. 8. That millions of vacation people have died of confluent small p while having the plainest vacation scars on their bodies. 9. That small p epidemics invariably attack the vacation first. 10. That small p follows closely upon flagrant violation of the laws of health, hygiene, and sanitation. 11. That the occurrence of all the great epidemics of small p have coincided with periods of sanitary neglect. 12. That cow p and venereal p have much in common. 13. That the analogy between the manifestation of vacations and those of syphilis is so close that several of the most eminent pathologists of the world regard cow pee as a modified form of syphilis. 14. That so-called spontaneous cow pee is a myth. That cow pee is a disorder not natural to the cow. That it never occurs in bulls or steers, nor in young heifers that have been milked. That it is a disease of milk cows, which has been communicated to them from sores on the hands of milkers who are suffering from syphilis. 15. That the serious killer diseases such as cancer, syphilis, heart trouble, the one that starts with a P that we'll call oleo, tuberculosis, etc., will never be eliminated as long as blood pollution through vacation is continued. 16. That the community that has sanitary surroundings, a pure water supply, wholesome food, good health, and freedom from the blood poisoning effects of vacations need have no fear of small p or any other diseases. 17. That no man can be truly said to be susceptible to the contagion of small p or to that of any other disease so long as he is in a state of perfect health. 18. That such a state resists and repels the assaults of all morbidic influences and is therefore the best protective against disease. 19. The vacation has utterly failed to fulfill the promises made for it by Jenner and his followers, and that he saddled a legacy of disease and death upon the race for which he was paid $150,000 by the British government. 20. That compulsory vacations rank with human slavery and religious persecution as one of the most flagrant outrages upon the rights of the human race. 21, that Switzerland, England, Australia, and other enlightened countries abolished compulsory vacations after it was tested and proved to be disastrous. But laws sanctioning this crime still disgrace the statute books of quote-unquote free America. 22, that reforms are not made by those who profit by them, so that doctors or the government cannot be depended upon to abolish vacations of their own volition. That the people themselves must rise up and make demands for freedom from the curse of greed, ignorance, and destruction. For only then can we hope to see the light of a new day of health, progress, and harmonious adjustment. And that's the end of chapter 1.